can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy. It's too easy. I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy. It's too easy. It's too easy. I've been there, done it, seen it. Boy, all that like Keenan. Still got crack, they fiendin'. Flow still hot like Phoenix. Shine so bright, I'm gleaming. This off top.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Breaking Bet here on this Friday, May 5th. Happy Cinco de Mayo to all those who celebrate. I know I'm going to be celebrating a ton tonight with margaritas to the face, nonstop. I'm going to welcome in my guy here, Matt Grissom. I did an appearance on his show yesterday, College Baseball Insiders, and he repaid the favor by coming back on with me yet again as my co-host here with this College Baseball Friday. What's going on, Mr. Matty G?
Well, now you got me thinking about margaritas, but I've got to ask you, are you a frozen or are you on the rocks?
You know, that's a good question. So I'm somewhere in between both. I like both. I really like the frozen margaritas when it's really hot out. When we're dealing with like an 85, 90-degree day, that's really where I like to gravitate towards the frozen. And I'm very versatile with the frozen margaritas. Like I'll go with the regular, I'll go with the strawberry. Maybe if they're throwing a little bit of watermelon, like I'm always down to try something new.
So you like the exotics? You like the wild margaritas?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, listen, the regular margaritas are all well and good, but I got to add a little bit of flash to it every now and then. You know what I'm saying?
I see. We're oppo on that. I'm simplicity. Let's do margarita on the rocks, no salt.
No salt?
Yeah.
Just a regular margarita. Regular margarita.
Yeah, never been a huge fan of salt on the rim for whatever reason. It just changes the taste too much. So
yeah, I mean, I could understand that. I think you're wrong, of course, but you know, I do understand, to each his own. Looking for a nice margarita today, this evening, to watch some college baseball, maybe to go along with, like, I don't know, some nachos, maybe some tacos, just something to get me into the Cinco de Mayo groove here. We got a big one coming up today with all these games, not only in the major league slate, but college as well. Because, Matt, this is the first weekend in May. We're only a couple weeks out from the conference tournament starting. And, you know, right now is really where a lot of these fringe teams, the bubble teams, are either going to, you know, pack it in tight and make themselves get into a position where they're going to be able to make the regionals, or it's going to be some of these programs that are just going to fade down the stretch. And I think we both have a few in mind. But before we get started into the slate for today, let's recap last night. Some wild results here. Alabama coming off, you know, everything that's going on with their coach getting fired amid a baseball betting scandal. They put it on Vandy with Carter Holton on the mound. It was 11-2, a monster victory for the Crimson Tide, who in their own right have hopes to make it to the regionals. Now, we don't know if there's going to be any kind of penalty that the NCAA leverages down onto them, possibly in the form of not even being eligible to play in the postseason this year. But nevertheless, they come out in a strong response, an 11-2 victory against a top 5 team in the country. Notre Dame takes down NC State, who is another one of these bubble teams who really needs to win this year if they have any hope to make it into the field of 64. They lose 9-7. And then Mizzou, the pain in the ass that they are, who won't go away, they managed to take down Ole Miss 11-9. Both of these teams are also kind of on the cusp. I'd probably say Ole Miss doesn't make it if the field ended today. But Mizzou actually does have a shot, I think, to make it into the field of 64. What were your reactions based off last night's games?
So I wrote the Missouri game off as a loss. I threw a half unit on it. I wanted some action. I thought with the news of Hunter Elliott being out and then Jack Doherty not starting, it was Xavier Rivas. I just felt like the plus money on a coin flip game like that, I should have backed the dog. And I had a guy DM me, and he was like, well, I appreciate the pick, but I laid it with Ole Miss. And it was like 8-2, and I messaged him back, and I was like, yeah, good call. Ole Miss is rolling. And I guess that's the reverse jinx, because later on he messaged and was like, what WTF just happened? And I looked, and Mizzou had come back and won. So, you win some, you lose some, but you're always happy when you wake up to plus units.
Yeah, always awake in cash. Can never, can never be mad at that. And college baseball is one of those sports you can never ever count it out until the game is officially over, because we've seen so many times where even top teams will blow big leads to inferior opponents, and that's just how it works, dude. And that's why, from an entertainment perspective, it's a lot of fun, but it's really stressful when you're betting on these games. So Mizzou to me was the right side, since Ole Miss was throwing Xavier Rivas. Chandler Murphy was on the bump for Mizzou, who, typically when I like to back Mizzou is when he's throwing. Wasn't exactly sharp last night, but nevertheless, they got the job done. But before we get into today's plays here, quick hashtag read. If you play a ton of prize picks like the rest of us at Karma, you definitely want to sign up for access to the prize picks predictor on this site. It includes AI player prop projections every day for NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB, college football, college basketball, WNBA, and more. Go to betkarma.com/JohnnyVTV and sign up today. Speaking of, dude, I was on an absolute heater to start the week on my Bet Karma prize pick props. I typically keep it 2 guys and just stack them at plus 300 odds. And I was on a 3-game heater where I just seemingly couldn't lose. And last night I did a 2-player stack, which I found out now your prize picks no longer allows you to do. I had Vladimir Guerrero over 1.5 total bases, which was an absolute smash. And Kevin Gausman, man, he let me down. It was to get 6+ strikeouts. And it's weird because the Red Sox were a team he typically is dominated. And Gausman's looked really good this year before the Red Sox started, outside of the outing against Houston. He managed 4 strikeouts, but he only went 3 1/3. And obviously that's not really helpful. And I actually thought Gausman was in line possibly to ring up a ladder and go 10 strikeouts, because he's been notching double-digit punchies a lot this year. Nevertheless, it broke the hot streak, but we started a new one, so no biggie there.
Yeah, MLB has been so up and down this year. Just looking at the standings, I don't really get into it much betting. I'll bet some first inning unders and overs here and there, but man, the White Sox, Cardinals couldn't be off to a worse start, and those are 2 teams I typically root for. So it's going to be a long MLB season for me.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's get into the college side of things. First off, we're going to have my Tennessee Volunteers at the Georgia Bulldogs. And Matt, this is a game and a series that we highlighted yesterday on your show on College Baseball Insiders with Quentin Mills. And, we're both in agreement, I think, that Georgia is live to take one of these games. I think Tennessee is going to be on upset alert all weekend. They haven't been a good team on the road, and Georgia plays well at home. They have a really good offense, and if their pitching can just kind of hold down the fort a little bit, there's opportunities to pull off the upset. Do you back the Bulldogs today against the Tennessee Volunteers, who are throwing Andrew Lindsay in the new Friday role?
Who is Georgia throwing?
Georgia is throwing.
Is it going to be Goldstein?
I think Charlie Goldstein's tomorrow. Colton Miller is today.
I don't know. I like Goldstein over the other pitchers, but I do think Georgia gets one. I haven't paid much attention to the price. I think I said yesterday, Tennessee's probably going to be around minus 200. Looks like they're a little shorter than that. So Georgia's getting some love by the books. I think a plus 145 play. Are you going to see Dolander, though, after Lindsay goes 3 or 4 innings? I guess that's the biggest question for the handicap, which in turn.
You mean Burns?
No, Dolander. Is he back to the second-day starting role?
Yeah, why wouldn't he be?
Okay, yeah, that's right. I thought Dolander was coming in for Lindsay, but no, Chase Burns is. Burns. Yeah, that's it. So is Chase Burns your de facto utility pitcher now coming in for?
I think right now, it's been working, so I think that's probably what they're going to do
on Fridays.
Yeah, they've been winning with Andrew Lindsay on Fridays. He's been throwing really well overall. And I just think the way, the rhythm here where there's a lot less pressure on Dollander, who's been kind of struggling a little bit recently. And, I think Chase Burns finally found his role right now. He wasn't really pitching up to par for most of the year. But now the fact is they finally found a spot where they can use him. If he has to go 3 innings out of the pen, he can do it. Or if they need him to close out a game in the 9th inning, only pitching 1 inning, he can do that as well, which I think is a real weapon, especially now that Andrew Lindsay is throwing as well as he is. But I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I do think Georgia will take 1 game. I just don't know which one it's going to be.
I don't think they take one tonight. I think outside of Charlie Condon, Georgia's offense just isn't as good as Tennessee's playing right now. Tennessee's hot. I mean, I think they win the series hands down, which would mean that they're probably going to win Friday night. So I would probably take Tennessee here or pass.
Yeah, Tennessee would be my play today. I think it's a game by game. I can't really preview the whole series right now. I need to see how Tennessee comes out tonight, how Georgia comes out, what kind of offenses we're dealing with. And, ultimately Tennessee, what they need to do, they need to get into the bullpen early because Georgia does not have a good bullpen. And what happens is if they're able to get to the pen by like the 4th inning, 5th inning, then what's going to happen is Georgia's going to burn some arms heading into tomorrow. And that puts a lot more pressure on the starters to have to go 6, 7 innings and deliver a good performance. So I'm with Tennessee. There was some buyback on Georgia. It got down to Georgia Bulldogs plus 135, and now it's kind of settling in at plus 145. I do think the Volunteers are the right side today. I probably wouldn't put a lot of money on them in like a parlay per se. I think this is only a 1-unit play. I actually don't have this out on my card because I'm just a little bit hesitant to decide which is going to be the game where Tennessee doesn't show up or Georgia ends up stealing one. But I do think picking a side, it's going to be the Volunteers. I think, I don't want to officially say they're back, but they're definitely on their way. And this is a team that if they close out strong, we might be seeing them host a regional. This is not out of the stretch here because they have Georgia this week. They close with South Carolina, and I think they may have Kentucky next weekend. I have to double check that schedule, but this is a big series for Tennessee.
The only thing that concerns me is they're 1-9 on the road, but I mean, pitching travels well, batting usually doesn't, and they're the number 2 team in most of the team categories for pitching, so they're the best pitching team in the SEC. So that being said, I think Tennessee's probably the play. I don't know. That road record would slow me down to race to bet them.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And, this is a game that I'm looking forward to because this is by far one of the biggest upset alerts for me the entire weekend with Georgia because this is one of those series that if Georgia doesn't win, this really puts a dent in them trying to make the tournament. Like every series right now, they have 3 series left in the regular season. They all matter. The rest of these games are of high importance if they want to really close this out. Tennessee is kind of in the same boat, but, as of right now, they have a much better chance to make it. And ultimately here, there is an outside chance that the Vols could end up hosting a regional because we would expect Duke to not be finishing with the expectations that all these top 25s and all these projections have them as. And I think ultimately there is a path for that to come to fruition. But let's move on here to a crucial Big 12 matchup. I'm really taking a shine to the West Virginia Mountaineers, bro. I really love what I'm seeing from WVU. I don't think they're really a team capable of winning it all, but, right now they look like the team to beat in the Big 12. I think they're better than Oklahoma State, and, I think they're better than Texas. I don't really buy many of these Big 12 programs. I think a lot of them are just kind of middle of the road, But West Virginia is certainly the leading of the pack right now. And they face the Oklahoma Sooners. And Oklahoma is another one of these teams that is right on the border if they're going to make it or not. And if you remember last year, Oklahoma was kind of like blah throughout most of the year. And then late April, early May, they started turning it on. And that's what propelled their run to the College World Series final. So do you think Oklahoma steals game 1? Do you think they take any one of these, or do you think the Mountaineers come up with the clean sweep, break out the brooms?
I don't think Oklahoma wins tonight. I do think they'll probably get one. Now, which one, I'm not sure. But West Virginia, like you said, I didn't give them enough credit earlier on in the season. J.J. Weatherholt is a phenomenal baseball player. And the Mountaineers are, like you said, the team to beat in the Big 12. I think they're probably going to win the Big 12. And with the talent that they've got from top to bottom and the lack of talent in the rest of the Big 12, I think the Mountaineers are probably in a good place right now. So they can't afford to drop a series to Oklahoma, but I think they get one. Just determines which one that is. It's the hardest part of the handicap. But I think West Virginia wins tonight.
Yeah, I played West Virginia out at -140. It's taken a lot of steam. So, ultimately here, Ben Hampton's going for WVU. If they can get him a win Friday tonight, I really like the matchup with Blaine Traxel going tomorrow. Blaine Traxel is a guy who has been one of the more unsung pitchers in college baseball this year. This kid's thrown 5 complete games. That's unheard of. Even Paul Skeens, I don't think Paul Skeens has more than 1, maybe 2. And a guy like Traxel is really coming on strong at the right time. He's starting to get it together. And I think ultimately West Virginia, I'm nearly locking in for tomorrow behind Traxel. And if they can steal game 1 tonight, I mean, not really steal, but because they're sizable favorites. But if they could take game 1 tonight, then I feel really confident about them taking game 2 tomorrow, locking up the series, and keeping themselves inside that possible top 10 ranking in the top 25 standing. So I'm on West Virginia tonight. I just don't see it from Oklahoma, man. I kind of had a lot of problems looking at them as a team that could even come close to repeating 2022 success after the late run. They got gutted in the draft. No team suffered more brutal, I guess, just disasters than what Oklahoma had to go through. They lost most of the power in their lineup. They lost 3 starting pitchers and an elite closer in Trevin Michael. So I just don't know if I buy it from Oklahoma. I think, should they lose this series, which is, in all fairness, likely, I think it almost puts a fork in the Sooners. And I just don't know if they're going to make the field to 64 and being able to recover after that.
Yeah, this Oklahoma team's just they're too hit or miss. And hats off to them for splitting the series with Stanford in the midweek, which was a rare 4-game series. But outside of that, they just really don't have very impressive wins on their resume.
They have kind of heated up as of late, but they're playing a really good team at a bad time. You mentioned J.J. Weatherholt. This is a guy who has been one of the best offensive players in the entire nation, and he's going to probably be a top 10 pick next year, 2024. I don't see how he wouldn't be after this. He's got a lot of position versatility. I think he's technically a second baseman, but plays a little bit of third base as well. So this is a guy that, he's going to be the driving force to see if West Virginia could be one of these like Cinderella teams that makes a run that's not really expected. Because this is a scrappy bunch, dude. They're not they don't have a ton of superstars, after Weatherholt, and their pitching is okay, but they're just a very resilient program that finds ways to win. And when the game is close late, they usually find a way to pull it out. And, you have to have a lot of those kind of performances if you want to make it far in the tournament, because that's usually the kind of teams that end up making a run.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So would you bet West Virginia today, and if it loses, double up on them tomorrow with Traxel?
I'm betting West Virginia behind Blaine Traxel. I'm betting West Virginia probably 95% tomorrow. I'm
looking at him. He's got the team's best whip. All his advanced stats look good compared to who I think Oklahoma's throwing Braden Carmichael tomorrow. Braxton Doudet tonight. So they've got the pitching advantage in both of those, as long as those guys can give you solid outings. And Weatherholt's in the lineup. I think West Virginia is the team. You may have convinced me to bet them.
Yeah, and I'm probably not going to do it, but in terms of the futures market, 100 to 1 right now, they've come down a little bit. in the market. I personally don't see them having enough depth to win. Like, this is a team, if they don't have JJ Weatherholt or he doesn't show up, they don't really have much of a chance, in my opinion, when they play the better teams. But, if he is in the lineup and he's doing what he's been doing and they're getting what they need from the starting pitchers, this is a team that not only could win their region, which they're likely to host right now, but I think they can possibly get past the Super Regionals and make it into the College World Series. West Virginia is right now the long shot. And when I say long shot, 100 to 1 or deeper, West Virginia is the team I would be looking at, because there's something about West Virginia that they find these ways to win in different fashions. And that, like I said, is what calls upon to succeed in this format. And I do think WVU would be my favorite long shot on the board right now, because they just have enough firepower to get it done. But, Maddie, let's get on to the next game here. We got the LSU Tigers, the number 1 team in America, at the Auburn Tigers, who really pulled off a stunning upset against a top 3 program in South Carolina last week. Do you think the Tigers, I mean, obviously you're going to take them game 1 with Paul Skeens, but you're not laying 255 in them. How are you approaching betting the LSU Tigers tonight?
I was about to say, you may want to clarify, because I'm 100% sure that the Tigers are going to win every single game. I do think LSU bounces back big tonight, and or not bounces back, but Auburn's not going to repeat what they did last week. Let me rephrase that. Paul Skeens is not Will Sanders, and I think he's going to come out, give you 7 solid innings, and pump that 103-mile-per-hour fastball for all those scouts. Auburn was a fluke last week, and unfortunately they got the better of South Carolina, which cost us both, I think, a lot of money. But I think LSU takes control of this series early with Skeens and Ty Floyd, and Sunday matchup will be kind of a coin flip game, but ultimately I think LSU's the far better team.
Yeah, of course we don't back these long favorites. I mean, if there's one team that you're gonna lay 255 on, it's LSU with Paul Skeens. But LSU to me belongs in a parlay. I'll reveal who I like with them later on. But I think ultimately here, something of note. LSU, obviously, I picked today. Paul Skeens, I can't bet against this guy, especially when there's not a matchup that really is intimidating, which is the case with the Auburn Tigers. But tomorrow, I think LSU is on upset alert tomorrow. They're going to be throwing Ty Floyd, who's been very hit or miss this year. He's coming off a very, very bad outing against Alabama. And I think what we're going to see here, what Auburn decided to do this weekend is mix it up. They're throwing Chase Alsup, who's pretty solid. They're throwing him tonight. He hasn't really pitched that much lately. He's battling some injuries. But tomorrow they're going to throw the guy that they've been throwing on Friday nights, and that's Tommy Vale. Tommy Vale is a guy who's pitched very, very well over his last 3 starts. I think he's only given up 2 earned runs in his last 16 and 2/3 innings across 3 performances. And, remember what I said about this LSU lineup. As good as they are, they've struggled against solid lefties. Now, Arkansas was a perfect example when Hunter Holland shut them down a month ago. And, they haven't really faced any elite lefties, because there's very few, at least in this conference. Now, we've seen LSU kind of escape the last couple series when they should have lost, and they ended up sweeping. The Sunday game against Ole Miss blew it. Ole Miss was up 2 runs in the top of the 9th and 1 strike away from taking that game. Alabama last week was up 6-1 on the Saturday game against Ty Floyd, and they imploded. That's a game that LSU should have lost. I think if LSU is going to lose one game in this series, it's tomorrow. So what I would hope is LSU wins big tonight, and then tomorrow, when they're about a minus 280 favorite, we're going to be able to get Auburn at plus 220, plus 225, and smash them for a big money line underdog winner. Because Tommy Vale, if he can give them 5 innings like he has been, maybe only let up 1 or 2 runs and keep this team in it, then I do think the Tigers, who have found ways to score runs, will have a path to victory against Ty Floyd, who at any given moment, he can implode and he can start getting shelled in a heartbeat. So that would be my handicap. LSU kind of, I don't say lucky, but they're sweeping these series in kind of unsustainable fashions that I do think eventually they will lose one of these games. And like I said, I do think with Tommy Vail going, a very tough lefty, that is the matchup where I would take Auburn tomorrow, the Saturday game against Ty Floyd.
Yeah, I love that handicap. I think ultimately teams are starting, and you saw it with Alabama last week, teams are starting to play a little chess. They're kind of throwing the game Friday if they're battling Paul Skeens. I mean, you don't want to throw your best guy. And, you had all the news break out with Alabama, and that's unfortunate. But like we've stated numerous times, LSU should have been a heavy favorite, and money on them shouldn't have been a big surprise. It's just like tonight. LSU is going to get a lot of money. It's not because there's something happening behind the scenes. It's the fact that it's Paul Skeens and you're backing a guy who's probably going to be, definitely going to be the first pitcher off the draft boards. So LSU tonight, 100%, and then follow that up with Auburn tomorrow. I love that play.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And, for somebody who loves Wake Forest like me, I want LSU to keep winning. I want the expectations. I want the spotlight to be on them because we've just seen a lot of times, the number one team has not won the College World Series since 1999. I believe it was Miami. And, there's something to be said for these expectations. But ultimately, we could look at last year with the Tennessee team. The Tennessee team last year, to me, was miles better than what LSU has this year. If not for Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens, where would this team be? And you got a really good deep lineup, but the fact of the matter is, they are not that well-rounded of a team. Their pitching is in dire need after Skeens. It's very hit or miss, and I'm hearing a couple people that are down in the LSU region are talking about how good they are. How are you going to come back and beat them in a format where, let's say Paul Skeens throws game one, then you have to come back and pretty much beat LSU 3 times, which, okay, that is very difficult. But, I mean, if you're going to throw Ty Floyd and Christian Little as the starters who have just really not been sharp overall, there is a path for LSU to lose and go home early. It would not surprise me if LSU drew the wrong opponent that they don't make it to the College World Series. I truly believe that. I mean, a lot of this stuff is luck. Because you can't help who you end up drawing. You can't influence what another team is going to do. So if LSU has to face one of these tough opponents, then, who knows? I mean, honestly, and I highly doubt it comes to this, but what happens if Tennessee's a number two seed, and LSU gets put into the Tennessee region, or Tennessee gets put into the LSU region? Tennessee's a team that could take down LSU. They were very close to taking that series.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said earlier, pitching travels well, and I would have to give the advantage to the pitching to the team with better pitching rotation. Especially when you're talking about in a 3-game series.
And I think ultimately, Tennessee has the second best pitching in the country this year, behind Wake Forest. And Chase Burns looked great in this new role. Drew Beam has been pretty good overall. And Chase Dollander is starting to come back together a little bit. And, last week against Mississippi State, when, it sucks because his line looked terrible. It's going to look like he didn't pitch well. And, he left a couple pitches up, and the home runs really added up the runs for him. But, Tony V comes out and says, listen, this kid's been sick all week. I didn't even want him to pitch, but he wanted to go out there and show out for his team. And, I guess I could give him a pass for that just because he's coming off a ridiculous outing against Vanderbilt. So, in that instance, there's definitely paths for LSU to be losing, especially if they draw a team that can really pitch. That's the avenue for LSU to lose. They have to get a team that can really pitch and match them. But speaking of that here, Matt, we have the number 4 Florida Gators, who's got a really good pitching rotation, when they're playing at their ceiling, at the Texas A&M Aggies. It was a big sweeperoo for the Gators last week. I was kind of worried about them against the Mizzou Tigers, but do you think, Florida has another encore and delivers against A&M all weekend?
I do. I mean, after what you saw last weekend with Texas A&M going to Fayetteville, this ball club's just not very good. They're still pretty young, and they've got a superstar in the making with Jace Laviolette. I may have butchered that name, but if he wasn't sitting behind Ethan Petrie and Charlie Condon, he would be in the race for SEC Freshman of the Year. But yeah, A&M just made way too many mistakes. I think Florida has kind of figured it out where they excel and what they need to be doing to hit their stride for the postseason. So this will be a Florida play for me or pass.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think ultimately here, what we're dealing with as finally we're getting some totals here on Caesars, which I don't know why we don't get them on DraftKings. Florida money line at -135 is too short for me. Or it's too short in my opinion, I should say. I think this should be more like Florida -160. Brendan Sproats had the bad habit of, being way too inconsistent. One start, he'll come out for 8 innings, 2 runs, 10 strikeouts, and the next he'll go 3 innings, give up 7 runs, and only strike out 4 and walk 5 batters. But I think it's Texas A&M, who does have a good lineup. He should still come out and give a solid performance. Florida should win this. Nathan Detmer is a guy who I do like, but that guy can't string it together for a lot of consecutive starts. And I think here we should expect to see a higher scoring matchup. I probably would look at the total of being 12. I think the over, a rare Friday night over, is in play here because, I don't know if I see Sproat going out there and just shutting down this potent A&M lineup. You got guys like Jack Moss, Jace Lavalette. You got a couple guys here in this lineup that can do damage. So I would say Florida. I do think this is a higher scoring contest, and I would think the Gators should, if not sweep, at least take the series and just continue to solidify their case as a top 8 seed overall, hosting a regional and hosting a super regional.
Yeah, I like the over. I think the over hit in all of A&M's games against Arkansas last week. And Florida's got better bats than Arkansas does, so I think that's a pretty decent play.
Okay, so now we have we're going out west here, Maddie. We're going to the number 7 Stanford Cardinal, who are decent favorites over the number 28 or number 20 Arizona State Sun Devils. Quinn Matthews on the mound for Stanford. Need I say more? I mean, this is one of my favorite plays of the day. I hate Stanford, but when Quinn Matthews is on the mound, it's a different story. I got to take the guy who's got 5 straight double-digit strikeout games. He's pitching his ass off. He looks like a guy who could be sneaking into the first round. I think he's probably the best lefty in the country this year. Argue with your mother. I don't really know if any other strategy would be fitting in this contest.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona State looks like they're throwing Timmy Manning, who's got an 8 ERA. That's not going to cut it against 2.7 thrown by Quinn Matthews. But yeah, Quinn Matthews is probably the best pitcher in the Pac-12, and you'd be a fool not to back him every time he's on the bump. This Arizona State team, I mean, hats off to him being ranked number 20. I don't know how legitimate that ranking is. Their RPI is 44 compared to Stanford's 8. I don't know. I can't make a case of why Arizona State would win this series, much less win tonight. So I think Stanford is the right play here.
Yeah, this is another one of these cases where, like, the top 25, at least on D1 baseball, has gotten shaken up really aggressively, and I don't agree with some of these rankings. Like, Arizona State is not a legitimate team to me. I don't see them being a top 25 overall team. I mean, you're playing in the Pac-12. As you alluded to, they have a 44 RPI. It's not very strong. And, this is probably their biggest test on the year. So if they go in and beat Stanford in a series, okay, now it's starting to look a little bit more legit. But in terms of the game tonight, you just mentioned it. I mean, Quinn Matthews he's pitching in another dimension right now. There are not too many pitchers that have been better than Quinn Matthews this season. And I think anytime you can get him with a Stanford team that can still swing the ball or swing the bat, -150 is a good number here. And, ultimately, I think this should be more along the lines of like minus 175. So give me Stanford, one of my best plays of the day, full unit, minus 150 with an elite pitcher in Quinn Matthews going, looking for him to go another 7 innings, strike out 10 batters again. And real quick before we move off of this, last week when I had the privilege of finally being able to watch a Pac-12 game because it was on ESPNU against UCLA, Quinn Matthews threw 6 innings, right? Through 6 innings, this guy had like 104 pitches. They sent him back out there for the 7th inning, finished with like 122. And UCLA did the same thing with Jake Brooks. Both of the pitchers had over 108 pitches. It was something I haven't seen ever in a college baseball game, at least in the regular season.
Yeah, that's insane. But that just goes to show, like, and I guess it's a little different in the SEC, but you want to milk these pitchers as long as you can because at the end of the day, you're only going to get one win. And going back to LSU, as good as Paul Skeens is, he's only one win. So where does LSU go to pick up the other 2? I mean, yeah, Skeens probably could throw a complete game and throw 140 pitches in an elimination game in a super regional. But do you want him to? No. I mean, you've got to have somebody else. So, yes, it's impressive. I don't want to talk about over pitching right now because Arkansas just keeps losing people left and right due to UCL strains. But, yeah, it's anytime a guy can give you over 100 pitches, that's hats off to them.
Yeah, you said it. And speaking of, we got another good pitcher going today, somebody that we really haven't backed lately, and that's Tanner Hall of Southern Miss. They're a home favorite, decent favorite, not too big, against South Alabama. Now, to me, I don't understand why a team like Southern Miss, who's throwing one of the best arms in baseball, who's actually been pretty good this year. Tanner Hall has had a couple stinkers, as he usually does, but overall, he's been solid. He's got a sub-3 ERA. The kid looks good. They're going to get to South Alabama team that's not really one of these elite mid-major programs. And I think minus 155 is way too short on this one as well. I feel like Southern Miss should be in the minus 185, minus 190 range with a guy like Tanner Hall going. Now, maybe Southern Miss loses the series because I don't really think that they're that good of a team. I don't really see them making that much of noise in the field of 64. But in terms of today, Tanner Hall minus 155, I feel like that's too short, and we got to capitalize on it while we have the opportunity to.
Yeah, I would agree. He's been hit or miss. He's won money and lost money all season long, I feel like. But the biggest takeaway, their home record's 21-4. I'd be curious to see what that is when Tanner Hall starts compared to a 7-7 road record from South Alabama, who's sitting at 22-21. This is not a very good team. They're going on the road to face a really good pitcher who may not be that great this year, but like you said, he is overall one of the best pitchers, especially in the conference. So I would back Southern Miss here. I think that's a no-brainer play.
Yeah, some of these, it's just, at the end of the day, even when you're looking at a team that's not good, you have to go with the pitcher. Like, which pitcher do you want to back? And for my money, dude, Tanner Hall's still probably a top 10 pitcher in college baseball this year, if not this year, top 10 overall when you combine the last couple of years. And I mean, at the bare minimum, Tanner Hall's a top 15 arm this year. Like, I don't know if that's really debatable at this point. So we're getting a guy like this, a pretty short money line price at home. And, these are starting to mount as big series and big games for a team like Southern Miss. Southern Miss was a really tough out for LSU. They took down LSU last year. I believe it was in the Super Regionals, or maybe it was the Regionals, actually. But, the Golden Eagles are looking at solidifying their position as well. So they're not a team that's really looking to coast right now. They have to keep stacking up wins. And, when you're in the win now mode and pedal to the metal and all that, you got a guy like this on the mound, this is a good spot to attack from a betting perspective. So I think, all systems go, green light on Southern Miss today with Tanner Hall and the bump ski.
Yep, I agree.
All right, let's get down to your Arkansas Razorbacks, the number 6 Arkansas team at Mississippi State. And, I like the fact that you tweeted out today all the injuries that Arkansas has and some of the newer ones. Do you think that the Razorbacks are on upset alert not only today, but all weekends? You got Hagen Smith going today against Cade Smith, and the pitching matchups really aren't decided for the rest of the weekend. Where are you going with this one, Matt?
I mean, after the Georgia series, I don't think you can not put Arkansas on upset alert at any point, and it's hard to win on the road. Arkansas comes in barely standing right now with all the injuries they've had. I think they're up to 9, maybe 10. Peyton Stovall, losing him, he hasn't been the best at hitting this year, but he turned down 7 figures to come to school and back up Robert Moore, who was also a phenomenal MLB guy for Arkansas at second base. So you lose him in the field. I'm not sure who they're going to play out there, but this team is just struggling right now. And I did lay the 180 based off Hagen Smith alone. I think you're going to see Hagen Smith and Brady Tygart today because you've got to win game 1 if you're going to try to win a series. So this is if there is a game to bet Arkansas in this series, I think it's tonight.
Unfortunately, I saw Hagen Smith, and I want to throw Arkansas on the card because of that alone. But Jared Wagner's out. Tavian Josenberger, those are the 2 best players in this Arkansas lineup. I mean, Tavian Josenberger, not only at bat, but this kid has saved so many base hits and runs in center field. He looks like Willie Mays out there with his ability to patrol center field. Like, I'm actually a big fan of Tavian Josenberger. So, it's not just the bullpen arms that they're losing. And even though they're probably going to throw Hagen Smith before Brady Tygart comes in, I think Mississippi State is live to take the series, to be honest with you. I just don't know if I can get behind laying 180 with this Arkansas team. I don't have an official play here, but if I did, I probably would just bet Mississippi State every game because I think they're going to win at least one of them. If they win tonight, Arkansas is in trouble for the series. The Razorbacks are not playing good baseball right now. And, yeah, they got away with taking it Texas A&M, but they had a really bad series sweep. They got swept by Georgia a couple weeks ago. I would think the way Mississippi State can hit, who, by the way, Hunter Hines is off the charts right now. This guy's got over 20 home runs. They have a really good center fielder by the name of Colton Ledbetter. I do think there's a path for Mississippi State to pull this one out. And the fact is, Arkansas doesn't have the offense right now with their 2 best guys on the shelf to match them. So if Hagen Smith is flat tonight, or, that pitch count gets up and he doesn't go past 4 or 5 innings, there's a real problem here for the Razorbacks. So I would actually side with Mississippi State if I was playing anything official. I'm not a big believer in the Razorbacks right now because of all these injuries. And, even aside from the injuries, they just haven't been playing good baseball in general. So I'm on opposite sides with you. I know you love your Razorbacks, but I think this is going to be a series where they might potentially lose because Mississippi State, if nothing else, they can hit the ball really well.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think they could definitely lose the series. I think tonight's game is the only spot where you're going to be able to back Arkansas and feel good about it. But yeah, coming in, they're 5-5 in their last 10 games. They're 5-8 on the road. They just lost a midweek to Lipscomb, and then they lost to Missouri State last week in the midweek. This team is very inconsistent right now, and outside of the guys you can trust, you just can't bet on them.
And to be honest, if Arkansas has a bad weekend and they lose this series to Mississippi State, you're in real trouble with them possibly being on a path to not host a regional. I think ultimately they probably will still host a regional, but if they're outside the top 8, then that means they're not going to host a super regional. And Arkansas's got a huge home field advantage. So, these are important series for Arkansas because, they're going against – it's still the SEC. The SEC, even the bad teams, are still probably at least above average teams in other conferences. So, you can't take these lightly, and Arkansas needs to stack up wins. Otherwise, they're going to be in trouble. And you're going to see them possibly lose a lot of steam down the stretch. And it's going to result in the ranking. So, this is a big one. I do agree if Arkansas is going to win a game, it's got to be tonight with Hagen Smith. Otherwise, I don't really know what to make of them. But let's get on to my team, Wake and Bake. The Wake Forest Demon Deacons are hosting Boston College, who is now without their All-American outfielder, Travis Honeyman. There's some bad injuries going on with this Eagles team who's kind of fading down the stretch a little bit. They peaked a little too early. Now they have to go against, in my opinion, the best team in the country in Wake Forest, who is throwing Rhett Lauder. Rhett Lauder's been probably the second or third best pitcher in the country this year. The guy's unreal with that changeup. And, again, this is Wake Forest at minus 325. This is not really an indictment of how we're going to bet Wake Forest on a minus 325 money line, but it's just kind of highlighting the game and maybe the direction. Like, does Boston College take one, maybe with Chris Flynn on the mound tomorrow? Or, do we think Wake breaks out the brooms for a clean sweep?
Man, I can't make a case for Boston College to win a single game. Not only do you have Rhett Lauder going tonight, which I'm so glad he's back in the Friday night role, but you've got Sean Sullivan and Josh Hartle the next 2 days. All these guys are sub-2 ERAs, or 2.5. I just don't see them losing a game.
So I think ultimately here, LSU Wake parlay, it's not going to net you a lot, but I think LSU Wake parlay should be an easy smash. If we do the math right now on what that would be on DraftKings, it's going to come out to be. Give me a second here. Wake and let's see what it would be.
What are you looking at?
DraftKings Wake LSU parlay. That comes out to be
minus 134, I think, or 137.
I mean, honestly, it's weird on a parlay that you're going to be laying that, but I think that's probably one of the safest bets of the night. What you got, Lauder and Skeens in two overmatching offenses on the mound here. So I like LSU Wake. I mean, you can even throw Texas in that parlay. That's on my card because Texas has Lucas Gordon going against Kansas, or maybe a Stanford with Quinn Matthews. Then you're dealing with three of the best pitchers in all of college baseball. So I think that's the way to attack Wake Forest, get them in a parlay. More so for the futures, though, Wake is still 10-1. They should not be 10-1. They should be 7-1. I think this is the best team in all of college baseball. I've said this for the entire year. And, if you haven't taken a piece of Wake Forest yet in the futures, I would advise doing it now because they should be moving inside of 10-1 relatively soon. Not really sure what a book like DraftKings is waiting on, but if I were you or somebody who hasn't played it, get on Wake Forest. This is a team that should be in very good position to make a very, very deep run in June. So that's honestly how I would look at the Demon Deacons.
How would you compare Tennessee last year to this Wake Forest team? Because I think they're very similar.
I think they're similar. I think Tennessee's offense is better than last year than Wake Forest this year. Because, Wake Forest has a really elite 1 through 5. They have a first rounder this year in Brock Wilkin. They're going to have a top 5 pick likely next year with Nick Kurtz. They have, a lot of good production to other places. You got a elite leadoff guy in Tommy Hawk who plays a really good center field. I just don't know the one, I guess, weakness, if they had one, and this is nitpicking because it's still pretty good. I would say the lineup from 6 through 9 is possibly a little bit of a concern, but it's really not that much of a concern for me for Wake Forest. So that's where I would probably give Tennessee the edge. But I mean, remember what Tennessee's pitching was doing last year. Tennessee had the best starting rotation. They have 4 legit number 1 starters. And Seth Keener, who has become a huge weapon this year for Wake Forest, he's a reliever, but he's a guy who they've been starting to throw in midweek. He held Coastal Carolina, an elite offense, to I think only 1 run in 5 innings. He's got the best pitch on the team with his slider. And, the fact is that you get a guy like Seth Keener who, in a pinch or in a spot where a lot of your starting pitching is depleted, you can come in and possibly count on this guy to throw 5 or 6 innings against a really good offense. That's a secret weapon because 3 starting pitchers that are awesome is great, but if you can get a fourth, that just provides so much more depth that could prove to be the difference.
Yeah, I agree. I just think Wake Forest, the price that they're at when you compare it to what Tennessee was last year, it's so mispriced, because I think at this point last year Tennessee was 4-1 or 5-1 when they were on their absolute tear. So
100%
disrespect, and I get the SEC is a tougher schedule than the ACC, but at the end of the day, you look at the stats, and Wake Forest is just as talented as that Tennessee team was last year as far as pitching is concerned. They're the number one team in every pitching category.
They call it the pitching lab for a reason.
Impressive.
They that they have the pitching lab down there. That is real. That is real for sure. So let's get to the last game on our slate here. We have number 24, which to me boggles my mind. They're inside the top 25. I like them. This is a team that I've been known to take shots on in certain spots throughout the year. That's the Cal State Fullerton Titans, who are an underdog to unranked TCU. Also very rare that we're getting an out-of-conference game at this point in the year. TCU is probably on the board as one of, if not the biggest disappointment of the entire 2023 college baseball campaign. Starters have not been announced yet, but to be honest, TCU doesn't have anybody that I'm really worried about. I think Cal State Fullerton takes today. I mean, you're getting this team at plus 135. And, to me, this is one where the pitching is probably more on the side of even, where you don't have any elite starters. You don't have any first-round talent prospect starters in this class. And Cal State Fullerton is a team that is very underrated. And if it wasn't for them being in top 25, a lot of people wouldn't even have heard of them. But they have found ways to win games against really good teams. They've beaten Stanford this year, and, they've stacked up some pretty cool wins. And this is a team that I think ultimately is very live to take the series. And if you're going to give me plus money on them today, I can't pass it up.
Yeah, I don't know why they're honestly dogs. Other than the book just saw TCU, it's a Power 5 school, they're the better team. Because Cal State Fullerton, if you haven't been watching them, I mean, they're 27-13 on the year. TCU has been struggling. They may be the most Jekyll and Hyde team in college baseball this year. They're 25-20. Every time you think, okay, they've turned it on, they're going to, they look good. They lose the next two games, lose the series. It's for whatever reason, TCU is just super inconsistent this year, and it's unfortunate because I bet them to win the Big 12. But Cal State Fullerton, I mean, this is take away the name, just say it's a college from California. They're good at baseball. They're coming to Fort Worth to take on an inconsistent team in TCU. You got to back the better team.
And I think we're going to see if Cal State Fullerton ends up winning today. I'm only on them for half a unit. Today, that was a half unit play for me. It's not a bad full unit play by any stretch of the imagination. So what happens is what I've noticed a lot of times when an underdog of this price range pulls out a win against a Power 5 school or a projected really good school, even though TCU is not that this year, we've seen in the next game big movement the other way. I've seen actually last week I saw it with Duke. When I gave out Duke at plus 145 at Virginia, then the next day Duke was down to plus 115. And I think ultimately here, and that's just one example because I've seen it a couple times. So if Cal State Fullerton wins today, I could see them tomorrow being maybe like plus 105, maybe even money.
I definitely think the line drops.
Yeah, I think ultimately we're going to see some line movement tomorrow, more on the dramatic side if the Titans can pull this one out on a Friday night. But Matt, as we're wrapping up here, do you have any other games that you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on?
I don't. I think you hit on everything. My favorite play of the day is that Wake Forest LSU parlay. Just call it the elite pitcher parlay. Mm-hmm. I just don't see. I don't see Rhett Lauder and Paul Skeens losing for you. I feel like that's an auto bet every time it's out there.
One that I found is very interesting. I'm not taking it because it was originally at an asterisk. The Oregon Ducks. They're doing some real strange things with shuffling their starting pitching rotation. Now, this is one of the pitfalls of college baseball, a lack of information. And part of that is we don't know why their ace, Jay Stoffel, who's been awesome this year, is not going today. And he's not even lined up for tomorrow. Sunday's TBD, so maybe they get him in there. It's unspecified if he's dealing with like an injury or fatigue or something along those lines. But this is an Oregon team that is pushing to be hosting a region. So it's not really any time to, take their foot off the gas, especially because they're dealing with a solid USC team. And Oregon actually dropped from minus 155 to minus 125. And, to me, that's very bizarre. Not really sure why Stoffel's not going. I haven't heard anything. I've been trying to look for it all morning, but, to me, that was a stay away. And really all these Pac-12 games I have no interest in except for Stanford, really.
Yeah, I would only back Stoffel if he's going. And like you said, it hadn't been listed anywhere. Maybe he goes Sunday, or maybe he's a scratch for the weekend.
One game I wanted to talk about because we didn't touch on it. I don't have a side here because they kind of pissed me off. What do you think about South Carolina at Kentucky? This could be a trap series. I mean, you got Kentucky, who's kind of been on the struggling end of things, and South Carolina coming off a really bad series loss against Auburn at home. Do you think the Gamecocks at minus 155 or, even on Caesars or minus 135, which is not big at Kentucky, do you think that's the side or would you go with the Wildcats?
No, I think South Carolina bounces back. This Kentucky team has completely fallen off from their race to being relevant. I don't think Kentucky's that good. We've said that all along. Yeah, they played LSU close, but they turned around and have struggled down the stretch. So I think South Carolina needs this series. I don't see them having a repeat performance like they did last weekend. Their pitchers are going to show up. The bats, we all know they're one of the best hitting teams in college baseball. South Carolina is probably going to be priced too high to play straight up. I didn't parlay him today. I'm going to just watch the game. But I think Will Sanders bounces back. Jack Mahoney tomorrow. I think that's going to be the right side. I'll probably throw him in a parlay then.
South Carolina is actually not too long. They're minus 135 on Caesars, minus 155 on DraftKings. If I was going to take a side, it would be South Carolina.
Wow.
The thing with that is, and that's a little fishy in itself, because typically you would think the Gamecocks are going to be minus 175, minus 180. But, because South Carolina lost and got embarrassed at home against a bad Auburn team, I think now they understand that they took it too lightly. They really didn't take them seriously, and they come out firing. And they should take the series and possibly sweep Kentucky. Kentucky, we both believe, is on their way out of hosting and, even being a top 25 team possibly. They peaked a little bit too early. But if Auburn had not beaten them last week, then I think this is an upset territory for Kentucky. But remember what I was saying last week. South Carolina has a bad habit of not showing up against teams that are not on their level. Against Florida and LSU, the pitchers mainly, they showed up. But when they play these kind of teams, they have a tendency to really fall flat. And, that's what happened. And because they got beat up last week, I don't think it happens twice in a row. That's why I would take South Carolina. Nothing official on this, at least for tonight, but I do think Will Sanders, he knows he's got to bounce back. These are important weeks because, the Gamecocks, with another series win this weekend, they probably solidify themselves as a top 8 seed, a regional and a super regional host. So, they're right there. And, I don't think they're going to take their foot off the gas or play this as a leisure stroll this weekend.
I'm getting a bet in on South Carolina. I think they bounce back. Will Sanders is pretty good about not having back-to-back piss poor performances. So I'm going to make that an official play.
All right. As you do that, let's read it off. My favorite plays of the day. Stanford money line minus 150 with Quinn Matthews. And then I like a 3-leg parlay here with LSU, Wake, and Texas at plus 154. You have Lucas Gordon going, who, along with Quinn Matthews, is probably one of, if not the best lefty pitcher in college baseball. Gordon's had a very strong year overall. Texas is playing Kansas, bottom of the barrel, Big 12 program. And, obviously LSU's Paul Skeens, Wake Forest has Rhett Lauder. So this is a really elite pitching trio, 3 matchup advantages with pretty good offenses. So I think for me, that is exactly the parlay to take today. You could check out the rest of my board on Twitter at _JohnnyVTV, Instagram JohnnyVTV_ and TikTok JohnnyVTV. You can find Matt Grissom at Grissom Tweets and College Baseball Insiders. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time today, and best of luck this weekend. Have a couple margaritas for me. I know I'll be drowning my face in some nice frozen strawberry margaritas this afternoon.
We'll see how the Razorbacks do tonight. It may just turn into straight tequila shots for Cinco de Mayo, but cheers to that. Good luck this weekend. Cash some tickets.
Best of luck, everybody. We look forward to seeing you next week, and cash some tickets.